We're going to talk about Russell Brand. The self-styled anti-establishment so-called truth teller has now been charged with rape and multiple sexual assaults. And what does he do? He doesn't deny the harm. He pivots. Let's have a look at the video.
Hello. Firstly, thank you for these incredible and overwhelming messages of support. We're very fortunate in a way to live in a time where there's so little trust in the British government. We're very fortunate, I suppose, that this is happening at a time where we know that the law has become a kind of weapon to be used against people, institutions, and sometimes entire nations that will not accept and tolerate levels of corruption that are unprecedented. I'm speaking particularly to those of you that are watching this in the UK. How do you feel about your legal system right now? How do you feel about some of the high-profile cases that are not being pursued and prosecuted? How do you feel that the Southport murders were handled? How do you feel about the government of Keir Starmer? Now, that's just sort of general context. Me, I've always told you guys that when I was young and single, before I had my wife and family, who were just out of shot over there, my beautiful children, I was a fool, man. I was a fool before I lived in the light of the Lord. I was a drug addict, a sex addict, and an imbecile. But what I never was a rapist. I've never engaged in non-consensual activity. I pray that you can see that by looking in my eyes.
Look into my eyes. No, thank you. We don't want to, Russell Brand. It doesn't actually help. He thinks that eye contact on a video can wipe away years of allegations. Let's be clear, though. I want to focus on Brand slightly, but this isn't just about Brand. It's about the entire system that let him thrive in the way that he has. He has spent years wrapped in fame, surrounded by silence, humiliating women on air, even offering his assistant to Jimmy Savile as a sex gift. And no one stopped him because the industry didn't care, because he was profitable. That sort of shit sells, unfortunately, and it's disgusting that they've allowed it to happen. Now, when he's finally facing justice, he hides behind the very language of dissent. And, it's a media conspiracy, he cries. They're silencing anti-establishment voices. Shut up, Russell. No, not at all. They're holding an alleged predator accountable. So let's talk about the real stuff here, the stuff that isn't a conspiracy. 98.4% of reported rapes in England and Wales never result in a charge. Rape Crisis literally reports that most survivors never even report because they know the system will fail them. Survivors get disbelief. Alleged rapists get podcasts. Cog, I kind of want to get your thoughts on this, and we can either kind of, unpack it in full. But firstly, what's your reaction to it all?
First of all, we've got to be really careful what we say on air because there is a trial ongoing.
True.
And we've got to be careful not to prejudice the trial in any way. However, we can talk more generally about the issue. Like, we do need to have a conversation about violence against women and girls. And I think there is, regardless if he did or didn't do what he's charged with, the conversation about violence against women and girls does need to be had. But I also want to bring in the aspect of, like, how much more difficult is this for your average everyday person? Russell Brand is put under media scrutiny and media spotlight. That gives him certain advantages in terms of his, like, celebrity and fame, but also the 98% figure that you're talking about is made up of a lot of men who are relatively anonymous and can use that anonymity to hide in a crowd as well. So there's different dynamics. And that's not to state whether he has or has not done the things he's accused of. Russell Brand is a very intelligent figure, and he did masterful takedowns of right-wing figures back in the day. And then he had this mysterious switch. And the same pattern happened with other MAGA bros like Elon Musk and Conor McGregor. People always forget this about Elon Musk. His right-wing swing, his swing towards MAGA, only came at the same time that he was rather credibly accused of being abusive towards women around him. And I feel like that is always a fundamental something that you need to take into account. But yeah, I am being extremely careful because the case is ongoing.
Yeah, we absolutely have to be. I think all we know is that, he's been charged with it. But it's whether these things will stand and if they happened. But I think speaking generally, then we know for a fact that, and this was in the graphic, that about 3% of cases that are to do with rape get to court, and that's quite a scary statistic. We exist within a system that isn't trauma informed enough to allow for women and girls and men who are raped to come forward and say, like, hey, this has happened to me, because our system just doesn't really mandate accountability in ways that it needs to be mandated.
If you get the opportunity, because I always like to give people practical advice, when you're talking about having a positive impact on those around you, look at the 5 Ds of positive bystander intervention. The off the top of my head, I think they are document, distract, delay, delegate, and I can't remember the 5th one. There's another one, but if somebody can look them up, maybe somebody can put them in the chat. But I think possibly 2 of the most powerful ones are distract and delegate. If you see somebody who is being being abusive in public, and they've got a friend with them, make that friend responsible for what they're doing. Say, don't address the person who's being aggressive, because they're just likely to hit back at your aggression. Instead, address their friend. Say, hey, are you going to let him talk to that woman like that? You need to take responsibility for your mate. Control your friend. And if you are a smaller person, then you need to be able to delegate to people who might not be involved and say, you two, come on, let's get involved here. I'm making both of you responsible. Stand between those two, stand between that woman and the person who is being aggressive to her, so that we can get this sorted out. I'm going to call the police or whatever it is. I'm going to contact the station security. For some reason, I always imagine this sort of thing happening on a train, but it can happen anywhere and is most likely to happen in the home. But the ability to be able to delegate responsibility to other people around you is a really powerful tool in order to be able to combat violence against women and girls that you see out in public. It's just general good advice.
I think we all have room to debunk any myths and misconceptions that surround conversations about abuse. So I think really reading up on the different forms of abuse and how it may impact people within familial relationships, within domestic relationships, within any sort of relationship that you can possibly think of. So read up on the different forms of abuse. Look into your local organisations and think about signposting. There is power that comes with signposting. And each and every person who is watching this, you all have a responsibility to safeguard. It is not just up to those who work within certain systems. It's also down to you. You have a responsibility to safeguard those around you if and when it is safe enough to do so.
A lot of MAGA people are going to step up and say, hey, Russell Brand should be presumed innocent. And obviously he should be in a legal sense, yes. And should be considered innocent of the predatory things of which he's been accused. And I would say to that, give that same grace to trans people. Trans people using bathrooms, you're going to give them that same grace? I think you've got a duty to, if you want to do this whole, you can't even talk about someone being accused of something. You've got a duty to turn around and use that same logic when it comes to not just your favorite celebrity broadcaster who wears a red hat. You've got to turn that logic around and start using that logic with trans people in bathrooms as well. Like, if they haven't done anything wrong, don't start accusing them of having done something something predatory.
Support independent media, support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.